Hi, Nibia.
Hola. Ahora sí.
Before you came up, it was those great photos of you like dancing on
Ajá.
those presidents. I was like, I'm sure Nibia would appreciate that this is the photo that we enter this conversation with. However fleetingly. Okay, so
Yes.
by way of introduction, I'm here with Nibia Pastrana Santiago, who is one of the artists in Tropical is Political, which is a show that's currently at America's Society. Nibia also is doing the flag that is currently hanging outside of America's Society. So if you happen to pass by Park Avenue, that's Nibia's flag that you're seeing there. And today we're just going to talk a little bit about her projects at American Society right now and try to put them in conversation with the rest of her practice. Oh, and Nibia is coming to us from Puerto Rico, which is
Sí,
her.
hola. I'm in Old San Juan. Estoy en Beta Local. Here it's a bit hot. In the Caribbean. And happy to talk to you again, Nicole. ¿Cómo estás? How you doing?
You know, I'm all right. You know how the new mom thing is. I'm a little exhausted, but you know, I'm here.
Same here, same here.
And I'm excited to talk with you and to catch up
Sí,
again.
sí.
It's been
Sí, let's do it. It's my first live in like 3 years. Like now that Zoom world is kind of done, I'm now doing live. So yes, let's just
but I mean, this is
virtually.
the first live ever. So you know, I'm being initiated into this brave new level of social media with you. So I could
Girl, me
use
too, me too.
first time partner. All right, so we have up the image of the flag. People can see it. And I want to start out by talking about that. I went to American Society, I think last week. And this was the thing that let me know where I was going, right? Because I hadn't been before. So I kind of came out the subway. I was wandering around. I was a little bit lost because I don't know New York that well. And I saw this flag, and it was a great way to find a building, but it was also nice for me as an island person to see that there and to think like, which island are we talking about? Are we talking about Manhattan? Are we talking about Puerto Rico, Jamaica? You know, so that was really exciting for me as an introduction to the space. So if you could tell us a little about your intentions for the flag, and what it's like for you knowing it's there, that would be great.
Sí, claro. Well, in 2019, I went to the Rauschenberg residency in Captiva Island, which is in Florida in the southwest, and it faces el Golfo de Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico. And while I was there, my main question, because maybe people that are joining know a bit about my practice or not, but my background is in dance, improvisation, contemporary movement practices. So for a while, and you know this, Nicole, because we've talked before, I've been trying to materialize my practice. Not that the body is not a material, but trying to make an external usage of external objects or materials outside of the body or the performance, although that's a question. And while I was in Captiva, which just a parenthesis, was just recently hit by Hurricane Ian, and here in Puerto Rico, Hurricane Fiona a month and a half ago. So this is really present. The ecosystem of the subtropical, it's very similar. Mangroves, agua salada, pajaritos, calor, all of this kind of Caribbean, ecosystem. So while I was in Captiva, that was the year also that here in Puerto Rico, the summer 2019, Puerto Rican people organized a massive protest against former Gobernador Ricky Rosselló with the movement Ricky Renuncia. So I think that was really present at that moment. And inevitably, my work usually becomes site-specific. So I was in Captiva. Of course, Nibia is going to respond to what's happening in the immediacy. and the present moment and the politics of that smaller island, which has other like, let's say, residents. But what I want to tell you, Nicole, is that a few days I went out of the residency just to bike, and you would see in the shoreline, no, to the beach, private entrance, like little like driveways, decorated and everything, like, oh, this is the entrance, right? And for us as islanders, access to water and the beach is like, there's no question, this is your right, you should, right? So that was a part of the landscape there, the private entrance and then the public access to the water. So that was there, combined with what has been happening forever in a colony, in the colonies, that imperialistic forces assume the territory is theirs. So this is the play with theirs and ours. And in Puerto Rico, after the hurricanes in 2017, there's been aumentado. It's more aggressive, the kind of ¿cómo se dice? Sale of the lands, or all of this property and ownership. And so I was really aware of how advertisement, and this has to do with the exhibition, has to do with how you present a place to the outsider. And so it's very common to see here and elsewhere, because islands are a fantasy to people elsewhere. Like the notion of paradise, or the notion of vacation or beach dream home, or la casita de playa, lo que sea. Y me as a Puerto Rican, coming in and out of the island, I would see these kind of advertisements being more aggressive and blunt, like, here, your house,
yep.
ven, compra,
in
blah,
the airport,
blah.
welcome to paradise.
Sí, welcome to paradise.
Your slice of paradise, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Exactamente. And while I was in Captiva, and at the same time asking myself, how do I make my practice outside of my body? I was, everything comes at once when you're alive and you're, intersected by all of these phenomena of protest, all of this. So I don't have an exact way of how it happened, but of course it's an implosion. And I was like, oh, my body floats the water. I'm just gonna do an anti-touristic fake advertisement. And so that's how the slogan, your island here, cross the U, and then becomes the our island here. Then, as you can see in the slideshow, and at the residency, I did some tests of materials, because it's something that you do. And at the end, I wanted this to be performative and participatory. So I, talking to my colleagues, artists, at the residency, let's just do a walk on the water and let's document this from above. So there's also something of my own history in questioning horizontality and verticality in dance or the body, and this we can talk further. So the idea that the banner is horizontal, is on the floor, or it's on the ocean, and it can be looked from above, from a drone, from an airplane, just to signal, like, wherever you're landing, it's not yours, it's the people's here. So for the exhibition, talking to Marina Reyes Franco and figuring out the flag, I adapted the design in collaboration with Ignacio Nacho, a Spanish collaborator that I have, and then we came up with the vertical design for our island here. And there, again, just to point back to what you were saying, it's like, whose island? So who is you, who is I? So that's up. That I like that in that way. It's performative, and it just depends who's interacting with the banner or the flag. I do want to say that I try to be very careful with the. I am careful with the use of plural pronouns, like ours or me, because I can't talk for like all the Puerto Rican people. It's just my individual experience as nibia pastrana. but experiencing how activism and mass protest and popular movement do have an effect, then I was like, I don't have an issue using our, because this is clearly an urgency to remind, this is not for the visitor or the rich person that wants to buy a piece of land or beach property in Puerto Rico, where locals don't have access to the funds, or, we just want to have access to the water.
Yeah. I mean, something on that point is that I think certainly encountering it as a flag before going inside and seeing the video work, right? For me, I don't necessarily feel like I belong entirely on Park Avenue. So walking up and seeing the flag, it made me think about who is our for me and who is you. Like who are the plural also makes you think about community. And who you establish community with and who you think about as counter to your community, which I think is a feature of island politics, maybe national politics generally. And this moment that you're talking about of kind of resistance and really like beautiful rebellion also really speaks to that, like you and our idea. So I think the plural was really valuable for me in that way.
That's good to hear. I just want to say that creates attention, and I think that's good to hear. I haven't experienced it as a flag, as an object in New York City, so it's good to know what was the feeling.
It's definitely specific. I mean, hopefully I can hear from you after you've had a chance to visit that place. And of course, I invite everybody who is in New York or will be in New York over the next few weeks, to check out the show and to have your own encounter with the flag in that way, because it's really something. But there's two things that came out of what you said just now that I want to ask you a few more questions about before we move on. One, I want to ask you, why did it feel important to engage materiality in your practice? I don't know, we've talked about this before, but for the benefit of everybody else, I think it might be interesting to talk about that for a little bit. And then you also mentioned like this idea of horizontality and verticality operating in a certain way in dance and performance. And if you could maybe say a few words on that for people who are logging in who may be particularly interested in dance and performance, I think that would be really interesting.
Okay. Nicole, can you repeat the first question? Because I had some private messages entering.
That's fine. I mean, that your phone is a real hazard, right? So my first question was, why did it feel important to think about materiality in your practice? You talked about wanting to kind of move beyond the body as your primary material, and I was just curious about why that is.
Bueno, también writing is also part of my practice, and I see choreography and writing very similar, like they cohabit in the same realm. And after all these years, I think I've learned, and this I tell also to my students, I always ask myself, is dance the solution? Is dance the medium? Because in my own dance making, when I want to deal with a specific question or issue, not necessarily dance is the way to go. And I think that has to do with a question about form. So basically, I wanted to give myself the opportunity to also have the time to go to the unknown in other ways. This, of course, not from a perspective of, I'm going to learn all these other new skills and I'm going to now be a pottery person. Like, I know I don't have those skills, right? If I
Yeah.
want to do something like that, I invite another collaborator to do that. So, but I wanted to go into an unknown place. And I think that also has to do with my practice in improvisation. Like, even though it sounds romantic in what improvisation might be, to be in a situation where you kind of know where you're starting from, but you don't know the result. That's, I think, one of the things I value. Let's call it art making or process involved. Like, I don't do things because I know the end. So just to plantearme esa pregunta de, okay, how do I take these embodied practices of laziness or protest, or like the slideshow we're looking at now, like my performative engagement with public monuments, how can they live in another material? Because materials don't get tired like I do. You know, like the object, it's gonna be there in the exhibition for 6 months. I don't have to be there. And this is a whole other conversation about the curatorial approaches to performance and endurance. So I was like, you know, how do I sustain my practice? Because not all the time I'm going to be able to go and perform. And so I was interested in creating those new opportunities, for lack of a better word. And at the end, of course, it's the body that carries the big banner that goes there. It's implicated. And to answer your second question prompt about horizontality and verticality, esto tiene que ver un poco también con el Lazy Dancer Manifesto that I wrote in 2013. And the idea of who gets to do nothing, who's allowed to be lazy. And as a trope of Caribbean people, from outsiders and all of this relationship to labor, working the land, and who's supposed to do something, who gets paid, blah, blah. Actualize it to now, because I'm not going to go into history. It's tourism. It's tourism. It's like who gets the chance or the privilege or the access to sit or lay down back in a beach chair horizontally. It's not necessarily the local that's the host that's working towards this economy. So that for me was always a reference. It's not necessarily obvious, like, oh, Nibia's dancing, she's claiming all of these significance, or como se diga, significantes. Pero it's the history of my own, the way that I perceive and I move around in San Juan, in Puerto Rico. Y eso, pues, en la dance has a tradition. I'm being very careful because this is a whole open conversation too. Pero, you know, learn, train, repeat, exhaust, sweat. And there's a lot of pleasure in repetition and sweat, of course.
Yes.
But I mean, ¿cómo se dice? Como enfocándome en dance with capital D, like the notion of that kind of specific form, and to challenge that as a performer. So the relationship between choreographer and performer, it can be hierarchical, and it can be also like the visitor and the local. Like, I get the grant, you dance for me, let's rehearse, let's do that. So I'm curious to shake that those ways of operating in a dance field. Not necessarily applies to Puerto Rico, because here we need more money for dance if somebody's listening in this in this life. But I mean, to challenge economies of labor based on the body.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure in Puerto Rico you need more money for rest too. Money for like non-labor as well.
Non-labor,
But yes, so okay, we're at this image, and we're going to talk about this work in a second, but I want to go back to Balisa for a second, right? Because, so that's in a part of the exhibition, Tropical is Political, that we're talking about here, that your work is in, that is thinking about how the body is implicated in the visitor economy regime. And for those not familiar, the visitor economy denotes the economic activity by the people who visit a place, which can permeate all aspects of life, transforming a society into one that serves the tourist experience. And so this exhibition is exploring that in all these different ways. And so I want to ask you if, and you've touched on some of this already, so I think we can move past this question pretty fast, but does that feel like a resonant categorization for your work? Do you think about the visitor economy in quite this way? And how do you think the body is implicated in that? And I think some of that discussion about horizontal and vertical, that's some of it. But I want to invite you to expand a little before we move on.
Sí, bueno, I think of that in terms of bigger structures. Going to like colonial apparatus, so tourism as part of this machinery. And I started considering the San Juan Bay, the biggest port in Puerto Rico, as this space for those dynamics or relationships that are happening, to question them a bit further, meaning like cruise ship, how many cruise ships come here, what does that do to like the local economy? And for example, los presidentes pisan, that work came from this kind of, another thing that I do, a strategy for breathing and thinking about performance, is just walking in a place to respond to that. So just to give you an example, as to expand in your question, I was walking and then I realized, and I see many times, so it's a thing that's orchestrated somehow, that tourists that come from cruise ship, the local taxi people, taxi workers, take them to the US presidential walkway, el paseo de los presidentes, como se llama en español. So you have these tourists, they can be from anywhere, not necessarily the States, I'm not sure. But then when they arrive to Puerto Rico and they go out of Old San Juan, they have the machinery or the ideology. It's like, come here and take a picture with Obama statue or Roosevelt or the president.
Choreography.
Yeah, and so I was very surprised because I haven't seen it. And then this is madness. Like, you come to Puerto Rico and then you see the repetition. Yeah. So that thing, for example, is a very obvious relationship between visitors and locals. And then the spectacle of what Puerto Rico, in this people that know Puerto Rico or don't know, it's definitely intersected by presidential bueno, un montón de regimes, not only the visitor one, but the one that's been repeated all over. And when I see that type of stuff, Nicole, what I really want to do is ask myself, is dance the way to go? Like, how can I disrupt this fucked up systemic thing of visitor? So I do performance, and that's how
so let's go back to the images of Los Presidentes Pisan. Because it seems like what you're talking about here is like a choreography of tourism, maybe like the way that tourism moves or guides or insists on bodies. Because I mean, this is something I've thought about from talking to you, like this idea that like social space is choreographed, right? And thinking about choreography that way. I mean, is that fair? And I can totally see how coming upon these Puerto Rican women, like, you know, winding up on these statues might disrupt what people expect when they come into that space. Was that the experience for you?
See, I think I gave myself a score, meaning I gave myself some instructions, and also I protected myself, because when you do things in the public space, I'm aware of that. You know, there's an identified cis female body it's gonna do something erotic, what might be read as erotic. Taking selfies, which at this time is 2014, so selfie with the camera, not with the iPhone. I didn't have an iPhone. So it, of course, it's a bit theatric, but I gave myself a score. I'm like, I'm not gonna respond to people's comments. I'm just gonna insist on robbing myself and demystify and also exaggerate this kind of, oh, I'm taking a picture with the president. That's so, there's some sense of honor, and then just be a performer that deals with a surface and a materiality, and these bronze statues are hot at noon and they sweat some weird grease thing because they wash them in the morning. I don't know. So all of that is like fueling this kind of performance and closeness to the statues. So in that way, the audience, I don't know, they didn't know what to do with me. Of course, some people were like trying to engage, and some men were offering to take the picture. So I was like, let's just do it, you know, whatever, let's just go with the flow. But in the end, it's I don't know, it's a kind of, for me, weird psychology shed that you're in a colony and then the monuments are for your oppressors. So how do we deal with that? I didn't want to ignore that. And for me, it's important to interrupt and to cause some kind of, like I said, disruption. So of course, those tourists had a different experience of the statues. Maybe they don't remember me, but at that moment, it was weird what was happening, you know.
I mean, and, you know, in the title, we have this phrase that I really love. I want to be a sexy iconoclast. I was like,
see. Like what this is what I owe in a way to performance. Is like, you know, sometimes I do have fantasies, and I shouldn't say this online because it's gonna stay in YouTube forever, but I'm not, you know, of destruction or, you know, these symbols or these statues, and then it's not possible, you know. I don't want to deal with lawyers or go to jail or end up in some weird whatever situation. But then ephemerality and your choice of owning your body and your sexuality in any way you want, and celebrating your, you know, Caribbean ass, no matter its size, just rub it against this and try to do something about it. And that is disturbing, you know. El perreo for some generations, or for some people, like just pelvic Caribbean movement, it's like, ooh, it can be, right? So, you know, I'm like, no, I'm gonna celebrate myself. And I think to cause again disruption, and there's a power, like a sexual play there, that also operates on empowering myself in relation to this statues.
and a sort of power of embodied experience, like, you know, what, you know, as you were saying, you know, once Nibia is going somewhere, she's going to be responding to the place and like the specificities of that place, and the temperature and the water and all of these kinds of things. And a lot of the time that embodied experience is counter to the story that you get through your body, is counter to the historical narrative that might make sense of, you know, this like presidential display in Puerto Rico. You know what I mean? So one of the things I really enjoy about that work over and over again is how those two things kind of clash in two different ways of knowing, like, or ways of being in history. Okay, so we're about halfway through. So for anybody who's just joining, I'm Nicole Smythe-Johnson. I'm here on behalf of America's Society, talking with Nibia Pastrana Santiago, who has her work in Tropical is Political, an exhibition at the America's Society right now that is curated by Marina Reyes-Franco. So just so you know what's happening. And then now, so we're gonna perfect, the image came up just in time. I wanted to move on to talk about some other work. So TTT, and you know, I'm not gonna do a whole set of preamble. I'm just gonna let you jump into it. Talk to us about this work, and if possible, you know, are there threads that are coming through from these earlier works that we've talked about?
Sí,
Say the
and
words. Sorry.
okay. TTT stands for thank you, Tego, meaning Tego Calderón, black Puerto Rican reggaetonero, rapero. So the title is Thank You, Tego, Thank You, Trisha, referring to Trisha Brown, an American choreographer. Again, I would say the thread of some of these works are the 2019 protests and El Perreo as a social dance manifestation. So this piece, I was also trying to not celebrate, but collect again somehow that evening where the local governor, ex-governor, finally accept or share his resignation that people were waiting for. That noche in Viejo San Juan was a night for perreo combativo, combati, reggaeton, no sé cómo lo quieran llamar, but the thing is like during the protest, mass open calls were happening all the time. Like, all the people that kayak, let's kayak to the back of the fortress, or horse riding, and even scuba diving. That's where the other piece also has this image of like protesting underwater, like the submarine future. You're never gonna be, we're not gonna leave you alone. You know, the corals are protesting too. And so that night was Perreo Combativo. So a lot of people came to Old San Juan to dance y perrear as a protest. And then, so it happened, the governor resigned. So in a way, months later, I had this exhibition, my first solo exhibition at Hidrante, a gallery and art space in Santurce. Shout out to Hidrante. Y yo quería hacer un performance. I wanted to do an opening. And again, I can't ignore what just happened. So anyway, so I was like, okay, postmodern dance. I know I have some of that influence in my body or in my memory of learning dance skills and dancing with other people. And then I also understand that my previous background is learning perrear in high school in Caguas, so as a social way of being with other bodies. So I wanted to do like a tiny, I've never talked about this in this detail, but I wanted to like consider like a retrospective of movement information that I had in my body and how can they coexist? Like perreo no es Trisha Brown, nada que ver. But then Trisha Brown has this piece, I forget the year, I'm sorry, called Spanish Dance, Spanish Dance. And basically the performers do a sequence of Spanish arms while they, como lo digo en inglés, se pegan. They form an accumulation towards the wall or a place, and they ended up together, you know, pelvis and up, all the bodies together. Mm-hmm. So I was like, perfect. Now I can do a similar thing to what I do with the presidents and kind of like take this thing that's like untouchable or sacred in a way, because it's no icon, but it's como a piece in dance, contemporary dance history, mm-hmm. and just do like a versión criolla, just to like, how can I affect that with my own history? Yeah. So in the picture from the left to the right, you see Paul Rodil, who's a local performer, Ezequiel, who's giving the back, and Luis Rivera. They're all performers and artists, and I invited them to collaborate, and basically we did a part of the dance, but a new iteration with reggaeton music with Tego Calderón, and instead of doing Spanish arms or Spanish dances, we're like perreando towards one another until we get together, and then we do the floor version of Trisha Brown and then deconstruct it. So in the end, the audience might need to have their original reference, but at the same time, even if the audience doesn't know, what are these people dressing white, like so formally perreando to each other? So for me, it was a way of creating a happening with perreo, and to, again, put into tension this formal dance with perreo, what appears to be like seemingly different aesthetics. Then in my life or in my experience of journey as an artist, they somehow coexist, and I enjoy them both in a way. So see, me fui, I went super specific to the piece,
Yes.
but in a way, it's like, dealing with references.
How can I have twerking and like a kind of history of dance together in one place? Like, what better for a solo show, right?
And then put a black light on it, and then the audience is also like moving and they recognize it, but they don't know where the show is gonna go, and then it like ends. Okay, that's it. That was. Turn the lights on, let's see the show.
It's also, I mean, it's this choreography thing again, right? Because, you know, a Caribbean body, like once you see that black light and there's some dancing going on, there's a thing that you're trained to do. You're like, oh, is this nice? Oh, okay. You know, there's some of that happens. So so you know, there's that, it implicates the audience in that way.
And for me, in that way, talking like bringing it back to the question of materiality or space, is like, of course it's a gallery space, it's not a theater, it's not like a stage, but then how to bring that sensations, like the bodily sensations, to another place, to another kind of temporality, and then just go back to the gallery time, which is you walk and see stuff, and then you go have wine or beer or Coke or whatever. Yeah.
How do we like move between those two all the time? All right. Well, so the next work that I want us to take a look at, which I think is pretty striking, and is a little bit of a departure, right? It's performance, but it's kind of happening in a different way. You know, you're engaged in history of painting and portraiture and all of that, and of course that earlier work, like this, like president, and like history of Puerto Rico thing again. So, talk to us about this.
Well, this, I'll talk briefly. Like you said, it's a kind of departure. It's also, it was an invitation commissioned to close to the 2020 election. And it was called Artists in Precedence, the Fireside Charts 2020. And so each artist across the USA and territories, and I already had issues with participating when engaging with presidential topics, but then I was like, of course, I already perrear con los presidentes aquí, let's do something else. And yeah, I took a chance, and this painting of the portrait of William McKinley by Francisco Oller was, I need to be careful with, because I'm not 100% sure right now, but was like disappeared or lost for a long time, for some decades. And then it had that, I don't remember the history right now, so sorry, audience. Pero anyway, apareció and was part of a retrospective of portraits, I think in the National Gallery. So when I saw the image of the president, I was like, you know, I'm gonna do the trend of people becoming painters in their home, paints in their home while in quarantine somehow, and let's just study the McKinley painting. So I did this. The picture in the left is the recreation. The picture is la foto es de Raquel. Raquel Pérez Puig, sorry. And so for me also became a theatrical way of dealing with history. And I wanted to deal with the elements. There are very few elements, but as you can see, the only thing I could find similar to what he has in the painting, which is something to stamp or whatever, is this American big eagle. So I was like, okay, let's make this a thing. And then the map that you see, I actually bought it in Old San Juan. It's like a Caribbean map. So cartography, again, if you see in the detail, you know, it's a map of Puerto Rico. And it's, so I was just studying the painting and trying to allow myself to do like a new series. So that ended up being a collaboration with artist Garvin Sierra, who took the picture. It's not included here, but it's on my Instagram account, and I can repost it for those of you interested. And we together did like my picture and the painting. And so that became like my contribution to to the president talk. But I do think in a broader circle, it's like to see myself doing that intervention in the touristic area in 2014, and then to becoming and costume myself like as a president, and knowing that the year is the year of the invasion. So it's like, how can I use different landmarks in history to intersect and to put my body in it different ways? So again, this comes back to, is dance the answer? Is performance? What is it? So yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm interested in this part because I can't look at this work without thinking about that earlier work, right? Los Presentes, quizá. So I want to ask, like, what did it feel like in your body to occupy this? You know, it's the pose is so stiff. Like, did it feel like a big stretch, or is there anything of note out of that experience for you from like a kind of from a bodily place, like being in that body that was the body dancing on the president's you know, this one? And I'm curious.
Bueno,
that question
this definitely, see, it does make sense because here I become bidimensional in a way. So I have to trust Raquel, the photographer, or Francisco Gonzalez, who was collaborating with me on the set, to direct me, because I might see the picture and then try to embody, but I'm not seeing the lighting. I'm not seeing how the feeling. So although I can be still and passive, that requires a lot of concentration. So it was a bit, you know, a photo can take you 4 hours just to get that right. And we look at it like, oh, we missed this little detail, like the finger, whatever, like what's that happening? And I think it was painful to do it in a way because Puerto Rico and ¿cómo lo digo? This notion of bankruptcy and debt, and then the elections were coming up, and just to revisit a painting from a century ago and to see, oh, where are we now? And what has changed? And just to, in my own subjectivity of shit, we're still like, you can change McKinley's faces for any other president, or even, I mean, even a local governor. Like this thing of local and US base is like, it's already so infiltrated in the local politics too. Like you have to be aware of quién es el buitre, like quién es el que viene a, who's the bird that's like, and that's what's happening with our beaches, our public system, like electricity system too, like the privatization of the land. So you see Oyer, I mean, I'm not a scholar, I'm not an expert on Francisco Oyer, but this is the way that Oyer chose to portray a president. And it's not far at all of like how I perceive politicians dealing with our land and our resources. So it was weird. I'm glad that I did it, pero sí, un poco raro.
Yeah, I mean, for me, looking on, it's so interesting how, and even talking about the process of photography and getting it right for the painting, how it's this like really intense kind of disciplining of the body, you know, which so much of your other work is about rebelling against or interrogating or asking questions. It's this moment where in your practice, you really allow your body to be disciplined in order to portray this kind of this force, right? This force that is well embodied, I think, by that like massive phallic bird of prey that's over your shoulder. So to me, it's interesting how this one work kind of occurs in the broader practice as this moment of intense discipline. You know?
I love that you say that, because it's to not to become, but to momentarily pretend or role play with that power really talks about how in my body I feel more comfortable moving and not looking away. And you know, we can do a whole study on like, who also gets to perform, or I don't know. I think it's a cool and interesting thought for me to like continue understanding better, because yeah, it's about posture and time and like getting it right, or ¿cómo se dice? Modelando para el fotógrafo o para el pintor. So see, it's hard for me to be passive in that way, pero at the same time, I think it needs to be read in the, like you say, in the broader, like his trajectory of my body of work.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let us move on to, I think, the last work we're going to discuss today. And I think we're doing well on time. We have about 15 minutes, so I think we're doing well. And yeah, again, let me let you introduce Nicole. I mean, I could talk all this thing, Nibia, but you first, and then,
bueno,
the questions.
Okay, I'll be short. See, I'll be concise if I can, because I get Bueno, esta foto, this image, to the left, it's me, and to the right is la artista, performer, and dance maker, Abuela Rodriguez Lora. And this was an improvisation in el Puente Dos Hermanos, in the bridge, Dos Hermanos Bridge in Old San Juan, which is a bridge that unites La Isleta de San Juan with the rest of Puerto Rico. So our island here is like, sometimes because they're bridges, you forget that this is a separate, tiny little, island close, that Puerto Rico is an archipelago, right? So this is part of El Weather Bureau, which I'm currently developing as well as part of my fellowship in the Puerto Rican Arts Initiative that's going to close this December. And I'm really in the middle of it. So for me, it's kind of tender to try to articulate. But what I know of so far is that people, it's not only the electricity, the military occupation, blah, blah. It's like when the US invaded, they also created is not the term in English, but established a weather station for Puerto Rico and the rest of the Antilles. So I'm very curious to continue researching on that, but to know that the way the weather was reported and the data was gathered for use of military practice, or I don't know, transactions in the ocean, or predictions about hurricanes, and all of this was also negotiated by American invaders at that moment, etc. So for me, a weather bureau is more like not an excuse, but a conceptual framework to throw the body into the space and deal with choreography about time, signals, communication, and predictions. Even if they're fantasy, it doesn't, I'm not trying to measure the weather with my body, but to use these notions and try to tackle new choreographic strategies and ways of being together. So at Weather Bureau, it's involved with somebody else all the time. And in this case, it was with Abuela. We had a score and we improvised using some elements. Yeah.
And so why is it important? Yeah, it sounds to me like collaboration, working with somebody else, is a really important part of this work. Why is that?
I think that's a great question. Well, I think it's better to do it with someone. I think my work also grows and gets expands by having conversation with others. And for me, it's a way of practice some ethic of collaboration. As a choreographer, or as a performer to performer, in the case of Abuela and me. And those things require, I think, practice to have to have collaborations, it's not an easy task, and to do it in performance when you're improvising, and we have different archives of information of movement or ways of interpreting a concept. And I love that, because then it's not what I'm expecting to happen, it's what the person or the people bring. And for me, that's like, yeah, I love performance because of this, because I don't control. I mean, choreographer, I put some da-da-da-da, but then the events, and this is a notion that's really close to my practice, where elements can be organized in a way for an event to happen. And yeah, there's chance, but I want to frame it in a situation where something memorable might appear, or something that needs to be attended to, like not problem solving, but something. And just to comment on this, is like when you live in Puerto Rico, and you know, it's so hard to stay, for me, my experience, clear, and I become a pessimist. Things are not getting better, you know, and then when we're together, something might occur that promotes some kind of change, or a tiny hope. And so for me, this it's better if we're together and try to find a relation. I wanted to say something. Okay, I remember. It's about improvisation. Here, Nicole, I would say we have to improvise a lot. Like you plan something, it get canceled. You do this, the electricity fails. Like I live amid some like failing machine, and then like, yeah, so how do we deal with that? It's not something that I want to solve, first of all, but if I want to do performance amidst that, I rather call up and find, like, I don't know, some pleasure in the pessimism, or some power in resistance. And also to create a space/site for, I don't know, rehearse some kind of ¿cómo se dice? Lucha, or like strike. Yeah. Sí.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the last time I was in Puerto Rico was just before Hurricane Maria. And I was supposed to write about some work that was happening at Beta Local. And so I had done all these interviews, all this thing, and then I left. And while I was writing, the hurricane came, right? And then it was just like a totally different, it just didn't even make sense to write the thing right before, because all conditions had changed in this really dramatic way. And all the things that I knew when I was there were now really changed. And so thinking about all of these things that you've talked about in terms of improvisation, in terms of like creating a moment of possibility as an antidote to, like, you know, the sense that nothing changes, feels really appropriate for thinking about the weather in the part of the world that we're from, right? Because the weather is constantly like intervening in your plan, you know, and introducing a new level of, what's this word, precarity, right? You know, there's economic precarity and the political precarity and the financial precarity, but then there's also the like weather precarity, right? That's this kind of ongoing part of being in a place like Puerto Rico or a place like Jamaica, where I'm from. So yes, that seems
and it's the weather, but it's also the instability of the infrastructures, right? The that are supposed to be operating in a manner to deal with disasters or earthquake and all of this. So it's tough. It is tough, and I know, in a way, that's why it's nice to talk to this live, because I still have questions about, like, El Weather Bureau as a platform for collaboration around specific, like revisiting or even, you know, going for the first time with a group of people to a specific site, and let's like, okay, let's look around. Let's use my performance strategies to discover something new. And this is the thing, when you put the body in space and when you let go of verticality and of course protect yourself, because you can find a lot of stuff in the floor, whatever. Don't do like I do. Then you see from, like, it's super cliche, but you experience a different perspective. Yeah. It's like you put your body there and then you realize, oh, the bridge is cracked. Esa grieta, when was it? You don't know, might be 10 years, 10 days, 10 years, or 50. And, you know, so for me to like allow the experience of the body to acquire information and not impose. This is something I think the Weather Bureau does. And I believe in general in my practice, when I consider dance, like dance is not something, I'm not interested in dance. Like I make a dance in the studio and then I take it. I mean, I don't have a studio. This is my studio visit with you, you know, I'm in Beta Local. But dance as a thing that dialogues with the space and the thing, and does not use it as a stage. Yeah. So when we did this performance in the picture, that picture is taken from one side, but I have other audience or passerbys, which are mainly my audiences, and street cats and all of this, and iguanas de palo que hay por todo Puerto Rico. You can see from different perspectives the event that's happening. It doesn't, I'm screaming because the trash collectors are coming now. Yeah, well, we're going to Puerto Rico. I'm here. It might pass in a bit. But yeah, it invites to be seen from different, it's not supposed to be a certain way. Yeah. So the audience relates to the weather, to the situation from their own desires or lack of desires. Yeah.
Well, I did have one more question for you, but it looks like we'll have to do that one in one-on-one because we're almost out of time.
We're out of time. We're out of Instagram time.
I know. I was also supposed to invite questions from the audience. I hope people knew that they were welcome to interrupt at any time. But if it lasts 3 minutes, there is any like rapid fire question or anything that anybody wants to come with.
Or emojis, you can, you know, I love emojis.
We're here for emojis too. I mean, you know, some smiles, so, you know, that kind of thing. All right, should I, you know, in this last 2 minutes, you want to give us some quick reflections on being a mother performer?
See, very quick. Everything is new. My relationship to my body has changed. I applaud to everybody that gives birth, brings life, cares for all of this. I do think that this amazing and weird and roller coaster experience, Nicole, you know of this.
Yes.
Yeah, affects in a positive. And also I want to say in the future, maybe my baby sees this in the YouTube future from 50 years from now, is like the body makes space, like literally, but also like vulnerability wise. So I feel like I'm still processing this new relation to a new human being. And so I from what I read, because I've also looked online and talked to other colleagues that are parents and artists or makers, how vulnerability or your sensibility and your attention goes to new places. So now I'm really enjoying developmental phases, passes, to see how, wow, okay, this is how motor skills develop and all that. Because you study this in dance you know, programs. I'm like, now I know. Oh, see,
is-
they're right. Or I'm like, no, that was not right. People, first, my baby didn't do this before. So I'm just there, just for the movement, just for that performance, holding up. But hopefully, we continue being caretakers and doing Instagram lives and sharing the love and sharing the ¿cómo se dice? El cansancio, the tiresome, fatigue,
the exhaustion, but also the collaboration,
exhaustion,
right?
The collaboration,
more and more and more.
More collaboration.
So it has been so wonderful, Nibia. I'm so glad
Gracias,
that
Nicole.
we're able to get this together through the fatigue and the missed appointments and so on. It is lovely to see your face and to spend this with you.
Thank you. Gracias. Say that again.
Oh, I just said thank you, America Society, for bringing us.
Claro, gracias por el ratito y gracias a Marina también por juntarnos y I'll see you around y gracias everybody for the present moment. Chao. Bye. Gracias.